The figure of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI is hard to fathom. Known and admired by many for his great intellect, he has been called the Mozart of theology. He also had detractors who nicknamed him the Panzer Cardinal or the Great Inquisitor, while he was the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Joseph Ratzinger is without a doubt an impressive figure who merits closer examination. Even more so when he surprised the Church and the world by renouncing the throne of Peter on February 11, 2013. Seeking to learn more about him, we traveled to his homeland. We spoke with theologians, Vatican experts, and close friends. We invite you to travel the way of Benedict XVI. February 11, 2013 was the date of the most surprising event in modern church history. Pope Benedict XVI, who at the time was 86, tells the world he is resigning the pontificate. A role that was entrusted to him on April 19, 2005, which for almost 8 years made him the pastor of the Universal Catholic Church. His resignation might have been a surprise for many. However, he was not the first pope to have abdicated. The last papal resignation took place in 1415 with Gregory XII. Obviously, after so many years, the news shocked the world. All kinds of speculations arose. Among those most surprised were the cardinals, to whom he directly communicated his decision. But one person was fully aware of what was coming. His private secretary, former prefect of the pontifical household of the Holy See, who has personally known him for over 20 years. He granted us an interview at the Apostolic Palace, and with him we tackled the subject of the abdication of Benedict XVI.
For me, it was a big surprise, and it was not a pleasant one. But he made it clear to me very quickly that there was nothing to discuss about his decision, and he shared it with me so that I would know what to expect. Though he did ask me to be silent about it, and of course I was silent about it, out of respect.
Some people see his resignation as a sign of weakness, others as a sign of humility. Some say he was pressured to do so. What's the true reason for his resignation?
The answer to that question is quick and easy. He actually answered it in the book Benedict XVI, Last Testament in his own words by Peter Seewald. Everything that was said and all the comments that were frequently made later saying that it was due to physical weakness or pressure from the Curia have absolutely nothing to do with it in all reality. Pope Benedict has not fled or yielded to pressure from the Curia, nor has he caved in to any feelings that some might interpret as a form of weakness. That's not real. He recognized through prayer and in his conscience that he was no longer able to continue with his ministry, so he did what he considered to be the only right thing that his conscience dictated, and that was to resign from his role as the Pope. He's a man of great courage, and a very strong interior freedom. And if I may add another word, I would say that he was also very humble. He has a lot of humility while also having just as much courage. Renouncing this ministry, it demonstrates a great interior freedom, and it requires a lot of courage and no less humility. I would say that with this combination, Pope Benedict convinced me that the decision he made was the right one for him, and not just for him, but also for the Church as well.
Was it a prophetic act that sets a precedent for future popes?
Well, I suppose, and not only do I suppose, but I'm convinced that every pope will have the interior freedom to know what he is doing. But if he sees the burden is too great, however, I cannot or do not want to say that this was a prophetic act, or that this could, in a way, condition the successors in any of their actions. Freedom is the key element, and a pope must have that in order to choose to do what he considers to be correct.
Who is this man with that inner freedom and courage to make a decision of this magnitude? What legacy and path does this great theologian, former prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and the great collaborator of St. John Paul II, leave the Church? Who is this man who decided to dedicate himself to prayer in the last years of his life?
I was born in Germany, and this root cannot and should not be cut. I received my cultural formation in Germany. My language is German, and language is the way that the Spirit lives and acts, and all of my cultural development took place there.
To know him a bit more, we traveled to Germany, to the land that welcomed his birth. We visited Munich, the capital of the state of Bavaria, where he was the archbishop from 1977 until February 1982, when he was called to Rome by John Paul II. It's a city full of life, famous for its soccer team, Bayern Munich, and for the Oktoberfest or beer festival that attracts more than 6 million tourists every year. One of the key sites is the Marienplatz, with its traditional xylophone show, which recreates histories from the 16th century. Our main goal was to interview the famous journalist and biographer of Benedict XVI, Peter Seewald, a writer of vast accomplishment who early on earned then Cardinal Ratzinger's trust following an interview which became the book Salt of the Earth. This was the first of many that would follow, such as God and the World, Light of the World, and Last Testament in his own words.
One earns respect and trust, not from saying what the interviewee wants to hear, nor by being condescending towards him, but doing serious work, truthful reporting. To me, the starting point is on the one hand, to be empathetic and warm, but also to maintain a professional distance. I had the opportunity to interview someone who, on the one hand, had the ability to answer as a guardian of the faith what the church says about each of the subjects it teaches, and on the other hand, he gave me the impression that he is a truly upright man. If there was something he didn't know, then he would just say so. He's someone who reconciles great wisdom with a lot of human qualities. One doesn't feel any fear in front of him. He would respond to every question, and it's very easy to talk to him.
In response to a question, he referred to the scope of the work of Benedict XVI, who wrote 3 encyclicals, 20 constitutions, 4 exhortations, and 20 apostolic letters, in addition to several books such as Introduction to Christianity, Jesus of Nazareth, the Infancy Narratives, and The Spirit of the Liturgy, among others.
The main message from Benedict is to bring people closer to Jesus so they can get to know Jesus. His fundamental contribution has been trying to unite faith and reason. And he is making us see that Jesus brings us an authentic and true love. It is incredibly difficult to summarize in one sentence what is covered by Benedict's work. He gives us, like no other, a body of work that is hard to fathom and visualize. But I think that his future work will have a profound effect on the coming future. It will be rediscovered, and its importance will be valued because he wrote it for a time of crisis that was in the church. And in Benedict, we have a teacher who guides us and gives us elements to guide us and find the answers to overcome this ecclesial crisis.
According to Seewald, we can learn from Benedict XVI not only from his writings, but also from the testimony of his life.
We can learn from his writings, but also from his life's testimony, from a more coherent life. I myself have been working on his biography for more than a quarter of a century, and I don't think I've ever found anything that most would consider improper or where there could be a discrepancy between thinking and acting.
Benedict XVI visited his homeland 3 times. The first time he went to Cologne to preside over the World Youth Day that took place in August 2005. Maria Brause, who served as volunteer coordinator for the event that had the motto, "We have come to adore him," still remembers the experience.
Since it was the Pope's first international trip, a large number of people came to see Benedict XVI. I believe almost 2 million pilgrims had traveled to Germany during that time to see him. I had known Pope Benedict before when he was Cardinal Ratzinger. It was interesting to see how he had changed, and I was impressed by his joy and his cordiality, how he could energize the masses of people, even though in reality, when he was a professor, he was seen as someone less demonstrative, not as someone who excited crowds.
The next year, in September 2006, he traveled to Germany again, this time to see the state of Bavaria, visiting Munich, Regensburg, and other places in the south. The pastoral world tour and the meeting with his countrymen was captured in monuments and memorial plaques at the most important places that mark his biography. In 1937, his father retires, and the family moves out to Uschlag in the outskirts of Traunstein. Here he spends the greater part of his teenage years, and for him, it's what became his true home. The house, today a private building, is closed. A sign confirms that Pope Benedict XVI lived here from 1937 to 1951. The garden and the flowers invite us to imagine the beautiful moments young Ratzinger must have spent with his family. Happy, but also hard moments, brought on because of the hostility of the Nazi regime against the Catholic Church. We are in southern Germany, in the state of Bavaria, in a town called Marktel am Inn, or Market on the banks of the Inn River. It was precisely here, on April 16, 1927, where we had the birth of Joseph Ratzinger. Founded by the Count of Leonberg, it was a village of merchants and river navigators that was destroyed by a fire in 1701. Nowadays, it's an attractive place for those who love nature and hiking. And of course, for those who follow the footsteps of Benedict XVI, here is found the house where he lived the first years of his life. The family home, built in 1779, is now a museum and is visited by pilgrims seeking to learn more about the origins of the Bavarian Pope. Many photographs of his family are exhibited there, and there is a collection of his contributions to the Second Vatican Council as a consulting theologian to Cardinal Joseph Frings. There is also a display of several of his personal belongings and a selection of his most important books. Very close to the house, located at 11 Marktplatz Street, is the City Council building and a square with a 13-foot-high column, which was built in honor and remembrance of the visit he made as Pope in 2006. Not far from there, we can find the Church of St. Oswald with its Gothic style, where he was baptized as Joseph Aloysius on the very day of his birth. The rain makes us imagine how cold it was when little Joseph came into this world. It was Holy Saturday, on the eve of Easter Sunday, a fact that marked Benedict XVI as he himself expresses in his autobiography. Milestones, Memoirs, 1927 to 1977.
I have always been filled with feelings of gratitude for the fact that, since the beginning, my life was immersed in the Paschal Mystery, which could be nothing but a sign of blessing. Undoubtedly, it was not Easter Sunday, but exactly on Holy Saturday. However, the more I think about it, the more I think it is the essential characteristic of our human existence to still wait for Easter and not be in the full light yet, but walk trustingly toward it.
The main human qualities of Joseph Ratzinger, when he was a teacher, then a cardinal, etc., is perhaps his simplicity, and parallel to that, his humbleness. He is a man who was raised by a very simple family in Bavaria. His father was a police officer who was sent to increasingly less important cities because he did not agree with the Nazis. So it was a very modest family, and it's what he has been all his life. A very simple man, quite frugal. All he had were the clothes on his back. The time I met him, when he was a cardinal and a pope, he had a 40 or 50-year-old watch that had belonged to his sister, Maria Ratzinger, who had looked after him during a good part of his life as a priest and bishop. So I would say a great intelligence, great simplicity, very humble. And on a human level, one thing that moved me was his timidity. He was a shy man.
From Markdal, we go to the Marian sanctuary of Altutun, one of the most visited in the area, where Saint Conrad of Parsham is venerated, a humble doorman who embodies the humility and kindness of the Bavarian people. Just like many other families in this region, Joseph also frequently visited this sanctuary with his parents, Joseph and Maria, his brother Georg, also a priest, and his sister Maria. His father, from an ancient family of farmers from Lower Bavaria, used to work as a police superintendent. His mother, Maria Pintna, was the daughter of craftsmen from Rimsting. Today, the sanctuary is an important pilgrimage site that gathers thousands of pilgrims coming to the chapel of Our Lady of Altutun, patroness of Bavaria, and that shelters inside its octagonal chapel an image of the Virgin Mary dating back to the year 660.
We are very glad that he was elected Pope. We have learned a lot from him, and he has given us great joy. He is a Pope from Bavaria. The most important message is faith. All those who believe and have internalized these values are united, supporting and helping one another. If you have faith, you're never alone.
He was our Pope. Now we have a good Pope. And I'm very happy. Perhaps that's because I'm German. And I'm proud that I'm German. So I'm proud that we have a German Pope. And I just think that's great.
To me, the most important thing he left us is that he has been able to unite faith and reason, and that he's written such excellent books. Of course, I was very proud we finally had a pope from my country. It happened after so many centuries. When he was elected, the German newspapers were shocked, all writing about it. The Bild published "We Are Pope," which was really unforgettable to me. And that felt really good for us. And while he was the Pope, it was also exciting to hear from our acquaintances who had sung with the choir. And when we were with them, they would say, "Yes, we have sung for the Pope in St. Peter's Square."
His most important visit to Germany was in September 2011, since he made it in the role of head of state. Upon his arrival in Berlin, he was warmly received by the country's most prominent leaders, amidst protest from progressive elements both inside and outside the church, who opposed his visit. This was an ecumenical visit, and he met with representatives from the Jewish, Muslim, evangelical, and Orthodox communities. Following his footsteps, we arrive in the German capital, where we visit the historic Brandenburg Gate, an 85-foot high and 36-foot long historical monument, whose construction was based on the gates of the Acropolis of Athens in Greece. We also visited the memorial that honors the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. It contains over 2,700 concrete slates, forming a sort of maze. We are standing in front of the iconic Berlin Wall, the first portion of which was destroyed on the night of November 9, 1989, which permitted the reunification of Germany. It's a memory still alive. Many tourists visit the wall, built and policed by the former German Democratic Republic, one of the most eloquent symbols of the Cold War. As Benedict XVI said on December 4, 2009, "It's a border of death that for many years split the homeland and forcefully separated men, families, neighbors, and friends." One of the crucial moments of the Pope's visit to his homeland was his speech at the Bundestag, or German Parliament, which many still remember. We walked to the Congress, where the former Reichstag building has been crowned with a striking glass dome directly over the plenary hall of the Parliament. Here, Benedict XVI was met by the German President Christian Wulff and Federal Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Für die Entwicklung des Rechts und für die Entwicklung der Vernunft wird ihre Größe finden, ohne ins Irrationale abzutreiben. Wie kann die Natur wieder in ihrer Wahrheit?
I remember the visit had a very positive impact, especially because a lot of people didn't know what to expect from it, and many didn't know what kind of speech he was going to give. Many people expected a religious speech. But it was nothing like that. It was a speech about the nature of man and the ethics of man. And I think that a lot of people responded very positively to that message of the Pope.
Germany is not a Catholic country, and even the media was very much opposed to this visit. They had a contrary stance in this sense. There were even some representatives of the government who were against him even visiting the parliament, against him speaking. How was this overcome? What changed?
I think it was overcome because, in the end, many of those same members of parliament attended the Pope's speech. And I think the speech changed a lot. In other words, many of those were opposed because they didn't want a religious leader making a speech at the German parliament as a head of state. In the end, the speech was so good. What he said was so good that he even praised the Green Party, saying that the ecological movement had been very good for the world and for politics in Germany. And so I think a lot of people liked it. The intellectual level of his address was also very high.
Was there any particular concept in his speech that caught your attention, or an idea?
How he spoke about the state. His speech started with him asking, What is the state if there's no justice? It's just a gang of criminals, nothing else. And that's a phrase that I clearly remember from the speech.
The main message of that speech is that all men and women have dignity. And this is very important for our times as well. The foundation of politics is a human person and the dignity of man. In the history of Germany, this dignity of man was violated during the time of what we now know as the Dritte Reich, the Third Reich. So when the Pope now came to the Bundestag in Berlin, he talked about this dimension, about the dignity of man, and he explained it as it pertains or based on the nature of man, as well as making reference to Revelation, as it is to the Christian faith. And with that, he also tried to point out to the politicians what is really essential for their political career, that they cannot abandon mankind, but they have to give guidelines, provide answers, and they must recognize the dignity of man.
The young Ratzinger was ordained as a priest on June 29, 1951, in the Cathedral of Freising, and he quickly stood out for his great intelligence, assuming positions as a professor of theology. His first writing on Saint Bonaventure was returned to him with a harsh criticism from a professor who considered the work to be modernist. His points of view were starting to break the traditional structures of the time. We arrive in the city of Freising, located north of Munich, where we visit its magnificent Romanesque cathedral, also known as St. Mary and Corbinian Cathedral. A commemorative plaque is a testimony of the visit of the man who used to be the Archbishop of Munich and Freising. Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, is a man who stands out for his deep interior freedom. If we had to summarize his life, we could say that it has been governed by his episcopal motto, collaborator of the truth. The meaning and depth of the motto is explained by Joseph Ratzinger in his autobiography Milestones, Memoirs, with these words.
For about 1,000 years, the coat of arms of the bishops of Freising has displayed a crowned Moor. To me, it is the expression of the universality of the Church, which knows no distinction of race or class, because we are all one in Christ. I chose 2 other symbols. The first one is the shell, which is, above all, the symbol of being pilgrims, of our being on the way. We do not have a stable abode here. The shell also represents, for me, a reference to my great teacher Augustine, a call to my theological work, and, at the same time, to the greatness of the mystery, which is always much greater than all our science. Finally, from the legend of Corbinian, founder of the Diocese of Freising, I've taken the image of the bear. The bear becomes a beast of burden against its will. Isn't that an image of what I have to be and what I am? For you, I've become a beast of burden, and precisely how I'm in everything and forever with you.
This beautiful motto from one of St. John's letters was the common thread of his thought. He was convinced that truth is not an abstract definition, but truth is a reality that has become flesh in Jesus Christ. And announcing this truth, bearing witness to that truth to the people, was his great concern. I'm convinced that for many people, by his way of being, because of his wisdom, because of his writings, by what was announced, he was able to transmit his motto. In the conversations he had, he was always a very lively person and expressed himself with great conviction. I believe that this motto has helped many people to deepen their faith.
This Episcopal motto is very characteristic because in a particular way it connects the different phases of the life of Joseph Ratzinger, because he, as a teacher, researcher, scholar, and professor of theology, has always devoted all his efforts to deepen and reveal the truth of faith, the truth about God, the truth about Jesus Christ, the truth about the Church in relation to men. And so he has contributed to the truth and ultimately to the truth that is Jesus Christ incarnate.
In 1981, at the request of Pope John Paul II, he assumed the role of Prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Vatican office in charge of guarding and protecting Catholic doctrine and customs throughout the world. Being in charge of this congregation made him the target of much criticism, both inside and outside the Church, and to be called the Great Inquisitor or the Panzer Cardinal by progressive groups. He had to confront very strong currents, such as the Society of St. Pius X, founded by Marcel Lefebvre, which sought to erase any innovation introduced by the Second Vatican Council. And also liberation theology, which interpreted the Christian message using, to a large extent, Marxist theory. Monsignor Ángel Rodriguez, professor of moral theology at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome, and consultant to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith since 1993, worked with Cardinal Ratzinger for several years.
He has always had the attitude of seeking truth in problems, even though it led him to be criticized by the public opinion. Because he was a German cardinal, they called him the Panzer Cardinal, like an armored car. But the truth is he was a delicate man, a very delicate man. I never saw him disrespecting anyone. But in the end, he had to get to the truth of the faith. And from that point, he didn't move,
Was he a man of dialogue?
He was a man who listened a lot and spoke at the end. He would not normally impose himself. He wanted to listen to others, and it was after he listened that he would express his honest opinion. But he would always want to let others speak first.
Pope Benedict was certain that the Christian life begins with a gift from God and the theme of love, and as a matter of fact, one of the great contributions of Pope Benedict to theological thinking is that truth, the truth that is God, is love. God identifies himself with love. That is one of the great definitions the Bible gives us about God, and that is the beginning of his encyclical Des Caritas Est, God is love. Therefore, there's nothing further from the Pope Benedict's thought than rigorism or doctrine itself.
He was swimming against the current, and as a defender of the faith, he said things that affluent Catholicism didn't like to hear. They wanted to label him as a reactionary. They wanted to label him as the Panzer Cardinal. I think that he is one of the most misunderstood men of our time. With those classifications, they've tried to discredit him, and to a certain extent, they've been successful. I've asked the people around him, I've asked many people, his high school classmates, his students, his collaborators. And yet no one, except Hans Kung, saw him as a Panzer Cardinal, or as an unapproachable person. No one. Those who know him well took their hands to their head, as if to say, this cannot be. But it's also a sign that he has courageously confronted trends that he himself considered wrong. He's been a great defender of the Council. During the Second Vatican Council, when he saw movement towards something that was not founded on the fathers of the Church, he spoke up. For that reason, he was just going to continue being opposed. And still, he is massively opposed, even to this day.
One of the greatest sufferings he had to endure as a prefect was the investigation of cases of priests accused of sexual abuse. Towards the end of the pontificate of John Paul II, when the Polish Pope was on his deathbed, he offered the meditations of the traditional Way of the Cross on March 25, 2005. That solemn Good Friday celebration, traditionally held here at the Roman Colosseum, is still remembered today for his strong meditations, during which he spoke about a new paganism and of the filth evident within the Catholic Church. this collaborator of the truth his episcopal motto. When he denounced the filth inside the church during his meditations for the way of the cross, would you say that it's possible he was also living his episcopal motto in some way?
Indeed. John Paul II asked Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, to write the meditations for the Way of the Cross at the Colosseum. And that also yielded a meditation that refers to the filth that exists in the church. I'm convinced that precisely in the cleansing of the heart, in the cleansing of the human soul, is the essential element to get closer to the truth of a life of faith. The Christian life, the life of the believer, is never possible without a purification of the heart, without a conversion. He used very strong words in this Way of the Cross meditation. Seen today, we have to consider that at that time, in the year 2005, it was prophetic. It was an expression that frightened many with the church as well. But it was later recognized as a prophetic expression in all the dynamics that it generated and that concern us. The purification of the heart and the purification of the soul is essential when one wants to understand being cooperators of the truth.
I felt, even as a spokesman, and thus as someone who has worked a lot with him on these issues, I have always felt very encouraged by him to seek the truth, the meaning, and the transparency. That is to recognize what the problems are objectively, to listen to the people who are suffering, to see what the solutions really should be, and getting to the heart of the matter, even when dealing with extremely difficult cases, and even when, certainly, it is also necessary to acknowledge very serious mistakes that have been made, and this implies a burden, pain, and suffering for the church as well. And Benedict, for me, has been a teacher of truth because of his sincerity in facing up to the whole problem, the situation of sexual abuse in the church during his pontificate, and I'm very grateful to him.
He is an intellectual and spiritual figure of the 20th century and early 21st century. And if John Paul II had introduced the church to the third millennium, then Benedict has, with his work, brought the Catholic Church to the 21st century. We cannot yet quantify what we will lose by his passing when he is no longer with us. I think many people will open their eyes to his legacy and will discover what he has been as a human being and as a Christian. His humility is also great. He shows us how a full life can be achieved. If one looks at his biography, thousands of realities come to mind, and thus one understands what saints are like. In my conviction, Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, has led the life of a saint. He will not only be remembered as a great teacher of the church and as a Christian, but he will also enter history as a saint as well.
not be afraid of Christ. He takes nothing away and he gives you everything. When we give ourselves to him, we receive 100-fold in return. Yes, open wide the doors to Christ, and you will find true life. Amen.